Can you hear as well? Okay, great. Thanks. You have a nice mood video. Yeah, it was really great. And thanks, Fraktio, for having us here in this wonderful office, and all the audience that you came to listen to our talk. It's going to be about design systems. The full name is From Survival to Growth, how collaboration enhances design systems. So maybe we introduce ourselves first. So my name is Varya Stepanova. I'm a design system architect.
My name is Irina and Illustrova. I'm a front-end developer.
Stay here.
Okay.
Okay, and we want to speak about our consultancy team as well. So as you can see from the slide, it's called Bridge the Gap, and our mission is the same. We are bridging the gap between design and development, and we are helping companies with growing and boosting their design systems. And apart from practical development, so we are mostly technically oriented, but apart from practical development, we are involved in the defining good design system processes and workflows. So this is the team, and how we work. We come to clients as an established team, but we work alongside with clients' design team and tech leads. And all of us have experience with multiple design systems, and we are a distributed team, so people live in different cities and different countries. For example, Irina came from Greece to Helsinki to give this talk, and we have people from Spain, Switzerland, and so on, in the network as well. So usually we come as from 2 to 4 people at the project, which lasts 6 to 12 months. And at the project, we have a design system architect, which is me, then a senior UI engineer like Irina or someone from the network, and then 1 or 2 middle UI engineers. And this helps us to provide cost-effective services, but without compromising quality and the end experience. And at the project, we are involved in creating new components, refactoring existing code, bringing components into the product code base. We work a lot with designers, helping to streamline design to development. Then we do some DevOps work, which is design system related, so that the design system projects have continuous integration, continuous testing, and so on. And finally, we do workshops and trainings for the clients so that they can continue the work when we leave. And today we are going to speak about today's talk is based on the experience we gained at all these projects. So let's start. This is the diagram that shows ideal design system process, seamless and streamlined. But you don't have to go through all the steps in the diagram because I will highlight in a moment the most important parts. So basically, if we dream about design system which is fully recognized across all the levels in the company, it would be an ideal scenario. And in this situation, our design system team has clear goals and clear plans. And alongside, we would like to have a vibrant in-house community of designers and developers so that they, in time, communicated us their needs and probably even contributed to the design system. And we expect no organizational problems because we have all the resources at hand. And that also means that the product teams are fully engaged with the design system, and they dedicate their time to review the design system outputs. And the most important part, or at least my favorite, we continuously gather feedback and respond to it so that we provide something which is really needed. And altogether, that allows us to perfect this process which we would like to achieve. So this is the goal that our team sets for every single design system project that we handle. But there is just one little question: how exactly we get there? Yeah, easier said than done. Okay, now I spin off to a little bit of physics. And yes, the rest of the presentation is going to be just as nerdy. So let's think about throwing the ball. Just imagine that you need to throw something. So how do we do it? We never toss the ball just straight up, right? And we never throw it sideways. Instead, we throw it at an angle, as you see in the picture. So we are working both vertical and horizontal directions. And this is what gives us the best throw. And apparently, this is what we are doing with design systems. We collaborate vertically, and also we collaborate horizontally. So first up, let's talk about vertical collaboration. Here, I mean collaboration with the people in senior roles in the company. So there are business stakeholders, management, sometimes even folks at the CC level. So how exactly we approach them? And before we go to specific teams, I want to mention this article. You will get the link to the slides at the very end slide, and also the link to the articles. So don't worry. But I'm sure many of you have read this article already. Actually, let's ask, have anyone read the article? Yeah, we can have one person. That's great. Okay, it's very specific, maybe. But in this case, I recommend to read, especially if you are working with design systems. Because I know people, and I myself read it several times. And it immediately got my attention when it was first published, because it spoke exactly about the challenges our team faces all the time. As you can see from the title, the article says about selling design system, or in other words, about communicating its value. And it gives some good tips how to approach this systematically. And we are constantly in the mood of selling design system, especially when we are dealing with upper management and high-level stakeholders. So let's see what it takes to make a good sale. And I truly believe it is data. In the design system context, we are interested in usage data. So, for example, how often a component is reused in design files, or how often it's imported in code. And there are two approaches to collect this data, as you can see in the slide. There are ready-made solutions and custom-made. From our experience, we often start with ready-made solution, but end up with custom-made because it provides more detailed data and better flexibility. However, obviously, if it's custom, it requires more time to set up. But what's more interesting is the second step, because it's interpreting this data. It is important to find business-specific metrics that resonate with your upper folks, and so that they would like to follow these metrics. I will provide some examples that were on the projects we were operating. So one clear way how to communicate the value of design system is to say how much work design system has saved in terms of hours, or maybe even money if you can translate. It is often called return of investments. So briefly, idea is to calculate how much time different products would have spent without design system developing a particular component, and how much hours they would have spent if this component is available in design system, but they need to adopt it. And the numbers here are indeed exemplary. We can dive into a bit more details here in these calculations. There is one more important factor to consider, which is support costs. You can see it here, 20 hours a year. So basically, this support includes bug fixes, minor improvements, maybe answering the questions from people who are using this component. And if this component lives in a design system for, say, 3 years, every year it will be additional 20 hours. And numbers are, again, just exemplary and very optimistic. So in case of this imaginary button component, it took 10 hours to produce it. Then each of these 5 projects that adopted kind of pay 2 hours of integration costs, and the design system team every year spends 20 hours of support cost, and they do it for 3 years already, because this is how long the button exists. If we had these 5 projects to implement their own button, this cost would be multiplied. They initially spent 10 hours to produce the button, and then every year they spend 20 more hours to fix the bugs. So, and even if numbers are imaginary and very optimistic, because I've never seen a component that was designed, tested, and released in just 10 hours, but still we can see significant 270 hours saved for the company. And we can scale these calculations to many components, and impact will be just as great. So in this slide, you see a very small design system of just 3 components with very optimistic numbers, and still it's the calculation says that it saved us 4 months of work. We can discuss details of calculation. Maybe formula can be a little bit different, or where we get this data from, but it would take our entire session, so we will not dive into it right now. But for those who are interested, I just left a link to a dedicated talk which explains all the details. But why we included it into the presentation, and what I would like to highlight, is that in every design system projects our team was involved in, the numbers were just impressive. And presenting these numbers to upper folks really changed dynamics in discussion, and it always was a game changer. And I can share with you this figure, which is real, 3 million euro, and that represents the return of investments for a design system, real design system that our team was handling. And when this number was presented to the management, they were quite impressed. And that was the very moment that when design system began to gain much more recognition within the company. So basically, besides that return of investment, there can be other metrics, also business specific and product specific. For example, you can communicate about adoption rate, and that would signal how important a design system is for the company and highlights its impact. Or details of component usage can tell about specific needs on the product, and so on and so on. So basically, take away from here. Hello. Yeah. Takeaway from here is that speaking with colleagues from different professional areas can sometimes feel like speaking different languages. But if we want that they understand us, we have to learn their language. And in the context of design system, we have to take the aspects that are important for our counterparts and form the value of design system like in this regard. So that the benefits would be obvious for them. So if putting it more straightforward, when speaking with business people, we can just claim that their language is often money. And in this case, we have to speak money. So the next part will be by Irina.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Varya. I'm not sure if you should stand here or there. Anyway, yeah, so now that we looked into vertical collaboration, let's see what is horizontal collaboration. And here we mean the collaboration with our peers and first of all, the design system consumers. So usually it's the product engineers who work with our design system on an everyday basis. So how can we make sure that the design system actually brings them the value? Here I first wanted to mention another article written by Nathan Curtis, where he talks about 3 models of collaboration between design system team and design system peers. You'll find the link in slides, so I'll just briefly describe the 3 models he mentions. Solitary model, it's the model with least collaboration. The component library is provided to the developers as it is. No feedback is gathered. The team just works on their own roadmap. Yeah, no feedback is taken into account. Then the centralized model, where there is a dedicated team in the company which works on the design system and makes all the decisions based on the feedback that they get from the users. So the challenge here is that this team works solely on design system and might not have enough context on the actual product and not have everyday contact with the engineers who actually work with the components. Then finally, in a federated model, the design system work is done by a group of people who still work on the product features in parallel. So these people act like representative of the product teams. The feedback is communicated much faster. Also, since the team continues working on real product, they don't lose the context. They stay up to date with some product-specific features. However, the challenge here can be organize the decision-making process because the group is such distributed. So we won't talk about the solitary model because it's more of an edge case, and honestly, I don't think we ever seen it on the design system team when it's developed without taking any feedback into account. But in 2 other models, sooner or later, you will face the challenge of building effective collaboration. So we'll present some ideas what we can practically do to achieve that. I will start with documentation as the first bridge between design system team and design system consumers. Here I would like to give an overview how our teams approach crafting or improving design system documentation when we work on the project. We believe it's important to start with the research. It's especially important, like let's say if you work in a large corporation, that there are so many product teams that you don't even always know who is actually using the design system. You just have some statistics from NPM package, but you don't really have the access to see how they are implementing their components in the code. So it becomes really critical to understand who is your target audience, what are their workflows, how they actually work with the components, and what kind of information we can support them. So how to do the research? There can be many ways depending on the organization. The most straightforward way would be to send out the questionnaire to peers who are already using design system. When we do this kind of research, we usually prepare some set of questions, maybe up to 10, and we mainly try to ask designers and developers to describe their everyday workflows, like how they use Figma, how they use code, how they do the handover, where they see the gaps in communication, and so on. Another thing that we are practicing is having live workshops, again with product teams who use design system, or maybe they don't use yet but want to start using it. Live sessions, they usually allow to engage people in the conversation, and sometimes like very interesting details may get revealed. So for example, at one of such sessions, we once found out that our design system documentation was published with a storybook, and the team was actually not familiar with this platform, and they didn't even know that, for example, you can see the code snippet there and copy paste it, or that you can change the properties. So for them, the documentation looked useless just until they learned how they can actually use it. The last I have here is analytics. Again, data comes into play. So some examples of data that we track would be adoption metrics, of course, statistics from the NPX package of component library, and even the visitor analytics from documentation portal. It can help to understand like which pages and sections are most visited, and how easily, what are the flows of the users, how easily they find the information they need. Then comes what we call an industry research. So there are so many design systems which are excellently documented, and the work was done by really big teams. So it's always great to look up on what other people are doing. I will try to open it. Did it work? Yes. Yeah, so this is the Mira template. Again, you will have the link in the slides. What you see in the center, just an abstract page of design system documentation. And here, each section is linked to some kind of examples taken from other documentation portal, where it's shown how this section is organized and what kind of content it might have. I don't know how to move, Varya. But anyway, I just wanted to show there. Yeah, it has a screenshot. So this is something, just a template which we use as a way to organize the information we get. It's useful to revisit it when we work, but it's also very useful to present it to the stakeholders in this way. Because, for example, like if we discuss with the client some specific feature that they want to implement, it becomes much easier to show it on the examples when they see all the possible options side by side, and can easier make their choices. So just a second, what was it? Yeah, so when we are done with the research and analyze the results, we can start creating the outline of documentation portal. Here I'm just putting a few ideas of what sections you will probably want to include. So of course, components. Of course, you will probably want to have the documentation for each of the components. Depending on the results of your research, you may decide to have it more design-oriented or more developer-oriented, or you may even decide that you need to separate sections for each of them. Yeah, that comes from understanding who is the primary audience for the documentation. There are also some examples of which sections may or may not be included. Yeah, then foundations. By foundations, we mean design tokens and some essential guidelines, which are important for everybody to know, but they're not relevant for any specific component, just to everything in general. Accessibility, localization, surely there can be much more things. I wanted also to mention for design tokens, colors, typography, styles. So it can be documented as easy as just simple page with variables, or there can be an automated workflow that is exporting these tokens from Figma, transforming them into variables, even makes a pull request into the GitHub repository. So we have some experience and so doing these workflows. And so what you get is like this page on documentation. It doesn't need to be maintained. It's always up to date automatically. I will show a small example of that, a bit simplified, just a second. Then recipes or patterns or templates, rather an optional section, not always needed to have it, but can be useful. So What we mean by recipes is some repeated pattern in the UI which cannot be qualified as a component at the moment. One example can be product card, or maybe login page, or maybe something what is called an organism in atomic design terminology. So often you don't want to have it as a component in your library for some reason, but you still need to have it documented somehow. So this section would usually contain some examples, code snippets, links to ready design resources. And in our practice, one benefit of having this was actually that you can avoid situations, again in big companies, when two teams will work implementing the same or very similar feature in parallel without knowing that it's already exists in some other product. So yeah, the rest is highly optional. We found it particularly valuable to have technical information published at the documentation portal, like how to install the library, how to submit design system requests, how to make a contribution. This way, the design system portal becomes as a single source of answers, so people know easier where to find any information they are seeking. So when we have the content ready, we want to share the documentation with our peers. There can be multiple ways to do it. You may decide to build a custom website, so you have all the layout and content under your full control, or you may use one of the existing design system-specific services. We see teams opting for services much more often because building and supporting custom documentation website requires really big efforts that only big companies can afford. I placed few logos here. This is non-exhaustive list. There are so many services appearing every month. So something that unites them is that they provide an interface that even a user who has no experience in code can easily edit, update documentation. That's why designers usually prefer using these services. And also I have a storybook here because it's kind of separate thing. It falls into both categories. I wanted to ask who has experience using storybook or uses it now in the project. Okay, great. Almost everybody. I was actually expecting that. Yeah, you can say it's number one tool, not only for design systems, but probably primarily most popular at the moment. So essentially, it's a playground for developing component, running test, organizing documentation. In this context, yeah, it can be published as a custom website, or it can be integrated with all the services listed here. It's open source. It's highly flexible, especially since recent version 7. Has nice ecosystem. So I wouldn't say obvious things. I have some practical example of. So for this, we prepared a small storybook. Sorry, I'll try to switch there. Yeah, it's not working. Yeah, maybe I have to exit full screen. Yeah, so what we're going to show is just a very small, let's say, demo storybook. It's actually for our own small design system that we use to build our website. I just have a few components here just to show like the features that we often use. Okay, so here we have like token documentation. These palettes, it's internal built-in storybook component. And this is the case of automation that I was mentioning. So all of these pages generated automatically. The values come from CSS variables. So just a CSS file gets parsed and they are getting placed in this kind of way in nice palettes. We will be also, yeah, if you're curious to check the code, we have this repository open so you can check. Yeah, then probably many people again know, but one feature that we like a lot is autodocs, like which was introduced in Storybook 7. So before that, you had to write a lot of boilerplate code in order to create each page in Storybook. Now, these pages, like as you see it here, it actually can be generated from the code. And I have an example here, like these are JSDoc comments that I have in the code, like description, links. And then there's TypeScript interface with all the types and like description in the comments. So this all gets collected automatically and rendered in this page. It's reduced the development effort a lot. And another cool thing, you can customize this layout, but you also can write custom components, just React components. So Storybook provides you an access to docs context with all the data that is available for rendering this page. Actually, I'm not sure that this is well documented, but it's definitely available. Sometimes you need to dig in the source code of Storybook. So this is like one example of a custom component that we built for our clients who didn't want to have the stories long on the whole page, wanted to present them more narrow. These links, it's another example of just a small custom component that would parse the links and display them. So in this way, it becomes really easy to customize any page, and it's still not a custom built website, but it's very flexible in terms how you can make this look. Yeah, I also wanted to mention these status tags. It's a funny story because it was for a long time, it was a highly requested feature from Storybook maintainers, also from many clients. And we even developed our solution and open sourced them because it was not implemented natively. Only recently, they extended some access to the internal, so it's still not native, but it requires something around 50 lines of code to have this kind of tags here. Like you just define it in documentation as an array of tags, and it's displayed. Yeah, if you're curious to check the code, we'll give it. So I think that's what I wanted to show. Just, yeah, to summarize, while Storybook is not fully replacing the custom website documentation portal, it's very flexible, it's very extendable, it's open source, which is great, and it provides a lot of tooling out of the box that can be enhanced with some add-ons and custom components. Now I will give word back to Varya to continue on collaboration topics.
Okay, thank you. So basically what we had right now, it was an overview how to treat design system and especially documentation for design system as a product. But if we treat it as a product, we do it for someone, so basically for the customers. And in this case, our customers are designers and developers in the company. Now let's explore how we can encourage them to use design system or probably even to contribute to the design system. And here there are some ways how to engage with the peers. All drawn from the experience, but apparently we needed to cut a lot of slides, and I will not elaborate on every one of them. Instead, we have prepared director's cut of the slides. We link to that, you will see at the last slide. I will just go through them briefly. So basically, if you have onboarding sessions for designers and developers coming to the company, it's a good chance to say that you have a design system and probably even provide introduction and details how to use it. Then indeed, demoing what is new in the design system or how to use already existing things is a good idea. We often update about changes in the related channels. For example, in forums there, all the front-end developers in the company participate, or on some design gathering, and so on. And then, as Irina already highlighted, for documentation, we enjoy and like to base our work on feedback and research, and we are doing it not only for documentation, but for trying to do it for every single task. And besides these ideas, there are a few more on which I would like to pay a bit more attention. So this activity, we call it Design System Cafe. This is something what we liked a lot, and we implemented it in several companies. But actually, if I remember correctly, it was in 2 companies. In both cases, it was well received. And what you see in the slide is an invitation message for the very first cafe. And a special thing about the cafe was that it was very relaxed, laid-back meeting concept, and it was very different comparing to other meetings in the company. And because it was so informal, it was possible to share not only the things that were completed, but also some ongoing work, like in the middle of design or not yet ready pull request to design system. And that really created a relaxed atmosphere, which facilitated giving feedback a lot, because it turned out that people are more likely to share their minds if they see that something is not yet polished. And for us as a design system team, it was very valuable because we really got much more insights than usually. And we scheduled these cafes frequently, but not regularly. And this also helped to keep its informal nature. And here, a bit of product placement. So since we learned how good for feedback it is when you have such a relaxed meeting, we extended this concept to external meetings as well. And in Corona times, we held several times so-called design system breakfast. And now we want to run it again. So basically, it's a casual remote event when presentations are probably not so polished, but instead there is a discussion, and there is really a great atmosphere when everyone can just brew the morning coffee and really eat and discuss with friends. So you will get the link again at the very last slide too. And now let's go back to the activities that you can have in company. So the next activity for engaging peers is knowledge sharing. Many people I know highlighted the value of it. Basically, it's showcasing your work in real time for the counterparts. For example, a designer can invite development colleagues, share the screen, open Figma, and work on the components or change tokens. Or similarly, a developer can invite designers, share the screen, and in real time show how they translate design files into code. And I personally seen significant improvements in the process from such sharings. It was in the times when Figma just had two modes, edit mode and view mode. And all the designers were working in the edit mode, but most developers were using view mode. And apparently, the designers didn't know that not every modification of the component was visible in the view mode. And they only learned during such a session when a developer was sharing a screen. And surprisingly, the designer of the project saw that UI in Figma is different, and not everything they have designed is available for the developers. And it was really eye-opening moment. And finally, it resulted into the whole design team of that company changed their approach, how they build components in Figma and how they create specifications. So this is a great example of how such session can help to transform and improve the processes. And the last idea from the list is that people can change teams. So in our operations, we often play the role of design system ambassador. That means that someone from us, from a design system team, for a short time joins a product team to do some specific task. And usually it's related to design system. We come to help with adoption of some components or upgrade library version. And through this activity, we are getting much more context about how the products live, how they're using the components, and we are establishing very good long-term relationships with the peers. And by analogy, we can do also the other way around. A product team member can join a design system team for a sprint or two and also do some work. Usually it's related to the product that they represent. For example, they can build specific component or provide refactoring, which is very valuable for their product particularly. And one of the most valuable outcomes of this activity is that these people who temporarily join design system team, they are becoming advocates for design system. We are jokingly say that for the rest of their life. So that was the list, but I'm really curious if any of you successfully engage peers to design systems. If you have some ideas, let's discuss after the talk in QA session or later. So please share if you have something to say. And now we will go to the final section of the presentation. So we have seen the tips, how to provide, make design system as a product, what to do with the documentation, how we apply all the collaboration things. And now let's see if it changes the design system process and how. So basically, this slide illustrates the design system process in very beginning. So when we just start, probably by one person, and in the discover section, we are just building something on assumptions. Probably we don't even have defined session, which is why I disabled it. And design and development often done by the same person, which is why there is no review. So everything is very basic. But you can see the diagram below. It basically shows the maturity of our design system, and we are just building version 1 or maybe even prototyping, so we are on a very low maturity level, but we can jump to the next level. So as the design system grows, we probably are searching for what to adopt to design system. Maybe there are already products in their code base, there are components, we can actually pull them to the design system. And I personally count it as a contribution already, even though it's initiated by the design system team. But still, at this time, we are establishing already relationships with the product teams. And we have this discovery phase. Maybe the project management gets better, and we have more polished design and development. We are starting to have reviews. Maybe we are showing the results to the people from products. And finally, we have this loop from discovery to discovery, because we are communicating about the results to the people at products, and we know what to do next. And the design system in this at this stage, it steps out of the shadow. More and more people are getting to know that design system exists, and they can use it. And suddenly, dream comes true. We are getting our first contributions. So, but before we see how it changes the process, I would like to show you something. So, does anyone have a guess what it is? Okay, yes, please.
In The Wizard of Oz, there's a gatekeeper at the Emerald City, and he wears this unique.
Yes, exactly. Have you seen the presentation already? How did you know? Because I was thinking that I dropped this joke to the audience and there is silence. Yes, indeed. This is Emerald City Doorman from The Wizard of Oz. And this is actually what happens. It many times happened to me, and I know many people confessed that when they get in first contributions, they find themselves wearing this costume. And this is, yeah, basically we are becoming gatekeepers. And this is actually understandable because indeed design systems usually have to keep high standards, and approaches that are applicable at one product, they cannot be scaled up to the whole company. But you know what? I think that instead of being gatekeepers, let's become guiding guardians. I mean that we can approve most of the contributions regardless of how ready they are. Indeed, it makes us to do some work. But anyway, so if we are starting to get these contributions, the process is much more complex. But let's see in details. So basically, if we are taking this role of a guiding guardian, our design system team has a lot of hands-on work now, because we decided to accept everything, but we need to polish the things if they are not so ready. And some people might say that this is so much work, it would be easier to do everything yourself from scratch. And I would agree with that, but I still think that it's the right thing to do, because it works as a continuous workshop for the contributors. At first, we redo almost everything, but we communicate to the contributors what we have changed. And eventually, every following contribution is better and better. And finally, hard work pays. This is ideal world and unicorn in the slide. And finally, we are getting these perfect contributions we wanted. And overall, the process remains largely the same, but there is one important difference. Now, most of the design system team efforts are here. They are pulling together requirements for the design system and do the final reviews for the incoming designs and implementations. And this is truly ideal scenario, may never happen, but this is something we are aiming for. And this is something what all these facilitating collaboration things were about. So the journey our design system made was great. Like, we started from bootstrapping, then we searched for components in the products, adopted them, when we decided to guide and accept all the contributions that we get. And finally, eventually, design system gets much more recognition in the company. And this is when it counts as a real in-house product. It may happen earlier, but anyway, this is a direct direction to maintain. So, and our team keeps this process evolution in mind at every design system project we are working with. And officially, we might be hired to develop components, but what we end up doing is much more, is polishing and setting up these processes. So basically, this is what we got today. We spoke about collaboration with high-level stakeholders, then collaboration horizontally with the peers, and how that all enhances the processes in terms of design systems. We will be happy to answer your questions or discuss. And this is what I promised you. The materials, all the links are there on the page. That's it. Yes, please.
Imagine I have a company with a website that has like 20 views in it, and it's been localized to German, which has really long strings, or Japanese, which really needs large font size, and it has to work on really small screen devices and laptops. It's been taking years to get everything to fit right on the page. And I ask you to develop a design system. How can you persuade me afterwards that there aren't going to be any overflow problems with buttons here and there because a particular localization overflows. Do you do some kind of automated browser, like browser stack jobs, where then you inspect to see if there are any overflows, or how do you check that all these different manifestations of the site are going to look good?
I think it's more a design question, so I would rely on the designer. Sometimes they create different layouts for different languages. We didn't have experience with Japanese, but there are these right to left languages used a lot. And one of the designers in our network, he is actually Arabic speaking, so he is very experienced in that. And like what I evidenced, if it's a very small component, you can do same component for left to right and right to left, but sometimes there are like different versions for different languages. Can you say something
How
about
could we
that?
go
Yeah,
in advance?
maybe about testing. Yeah, so we plan and design components already accounting for using it with different languages. That's a job for both for designer and developer. Now you also mentioned testing. So yes, I don't remember if we had that project, but yeah, anyway, so we didn't speak about testing here, but one of the basic things that we said with the design system would be visual regression testing. So the snapshots coming from Storybook. So yeah, for such a project as you describe, I would imagine that you will have separate stories and you will test them in order to make sure that nothing is broken.
Okay. I was thinking that might be part of the report that you give to the executive when you ask for final payment, and then you transfer responsibility to their internal team.
I'm not sure
Is
if I got
that's
the
what
point.
that's what I thought your workflow was with the client, is that you develop the system, and then when you ask for final payment, because the responsibility for using or adapting the design system is then on their internal team, that you would have to somehow prove that it's adaptable enough for what they've told you they're going to do with it.
It usually goes at the same time, so it's not like we develop a system of, say, 10 components and only after that they're starting to adopt it. We are developing a component, and even before we release, we are checking if it's adoptable. Usually we have already established relationships with some products who can help checking it at their code basis. Like we call it team test. And only after that the component is released, and we are starting to work on the adoption in parallel while we are developing second and third component. We are already trying to enforce the adoption, because often our metrics are not to make the components, but to get them adopted in that many products. Yeah. Yes, please.
I have two questions. First one is
Could you please speak up?
Yeah. The first question is, do you have experience working with like universal design systems that work cross-platform, like web and native apps on mobile? Do you think they are practical? Does a similar workflow work for such a universal design system also? And then the second question is, there's usually some friction when you need to make a change in a product, and suppose that component does not exist. Developers have this friction to go into the library and update the component or create a new component. They would instead just make the change locally in that product. Like what kind of DevX is required in the component library so that that experience is smooth for the developers? Like what do you advise in cases where there is that friction? right? To go into the component library to create that component. Yeah, I just wanted to.
I can answer about multi-platform and you. About
Yeah,
that.
okay. Yeah, let's.
Repeat the questions for the camera. So we get Can you repeat the question before?
Yeah, okay. So the first question was if we have the experience with multi-platform design system and how successful it was. I've seen truly multi-platform design system, like when the mobile components are native. In like at some clients I won't name, but from that I can say that only tokens can be shared because the implementation is so different. So and maybe some even on the design part only tokens can be shared because all the platforms, like say we have Android and iOS, they have their own patterns how to approach UX, and you cannot translate directly the same thing. So even design libraries are usually different for that cases. But technically what we evidence, there was some code sharing if we have web library on React and mobile library on React Native, when it is possible to have some code sharing, but again, not everything. Yeah, but mostly it's tokens sharing design values. Okay, second question.
Yeah, maybe if you could repeat it because I'm not sure that I understood completely what.
Suppose a product needs a new feature,
Yes.
it needs new component, but there is friction in like creating this new component in the library. Like you have to create it, create stories, write tests, test accessibility, do all of that, create a new update to the component library to publish it, and then use it. That's probably shorter if you just create it locally in your product. So like, how can we make that simpler? As in, how do you make it simpler so that you get over that friction?
Yeah. So what you describe, it's very real life situation, I would say. So we are talking about like when there is a need in new component, you probably have some deadlines, but the design system team do not have time allocated and cannot help you develop in this component.
No, basically, it's more a political question, I would say.
Yeah.
So what I personally think that we shouldn't restrict this, even though it's not good thing for design system, but product needs are much more important because they face the client. But maybe it would be good idea to dedicate some time in design system to pull this to the design system, like clean after, something like that. And in one product we had very much customizable components which helped a bit with these situations, but it was mostly about the view. Like everything was with CSS variables and you could redefine anything, but it helps only with the view, not with functioning.
Yeah. So
Sometimes
I'm just thinking about one code base that we recently worked, which was kind of legacy. And so this situation, as you described, it obviously happened many times there. So at the end, it was maybe easier not to clean it up, but just to let it happen. And then we were at some point like rebuilding new components and readopting them aligned with the designers. It depends on how much effort the company can dedicate to design system development. If there are like big gaps, like 6 months, sometimes it's better to let it go.
Yeah, at one of the project we had a design system was called pattern library, but then there was an idea of pattern laboratory, which would be at every single product. And they had their own storybook and they developed the components, but it was in a way that was very easy to pull to the design system once they are ready. One more, two more questions we have. But could you maybe come closer and say, because it would be much easier for us.
Yeah.
We have a microphone here.
Sure. I just wanted to ask, how do you manage with the breaking changes in your design system libraries? What do you think is a breaking change in a design system, and how do you operate around it?
Anything that breaks is that breaks the application is a breaking change.
Actually, no, because if we can approach the people beforehand, the change is not breaking anymore. If we agree with them what we are changing. So, but here this data thing comes again. So if you really have automatic collection of who is using your design system and where, especially in code, then you can play this trick, like provide technically breaking change, but warn people beforehand, agree with them, then it's not breaking. Yeah, or you can just name components differently, like version 2.
No.
Yeah, then wait for them adopt it and then rename back. So.
Yeah, but from the technical point of view, like, yeah, we usually have the mechanism of versioning. So I'm just talking on the technical part here. So yes, of course, you will have the versioning, and the breaking change will be the measure versions. So it's not like the products are getting updates automatically. This is pretty safe. Also, we had this mechanism when we were implementing the deprecation notifications, which would pop up in the developers console. So for some components that we were warning people that they will be removed, and please refactor your code now.
Yeah, so basically it works if we are keeping 2 versions of the component at the same time for a while, but we constantly pushing to upgrade. And also, again, good if we have data for usage. Once we learn that, okay, no one uses the old component, we can remove it. Yeah. There was something else. Yeah. Yes, please.
So I don't know how many people know, but the reference pixel, so 22.9 inches at 1080p, like that's like the reference 96 PPI thing. So how do you make sure if something looks good on like that reference design level, how do you make sure it looks good on, say, these new laptops where you have small screens with like 4K or very high resolution, and you know, if you're using REMs and Ms, things kind of don't look so good. So how do you do the testing? Do you do it like on playwright level, or do you do it on storybook level? Yeah, maybe this is a new question, but
It's more.
Please.
Yeah, I mean, that's maybe more design question. So usually we expect this, yeah, so one thing like to account for different resolutions, okay, this somehow should be solved at the design level. So then when we develop the component, there is a stage of the design review when we send the just link to deployed pull request to the designer. And we kind of verify it all on like the most common screens, of course, not all of them. Now, playwright tests, it's a bit different thing, which is like usually implemented on the product level. So I'm not sure we had experience.
what level? So you do it at the design level, and when it's at the product level, it doesn't matter?
Yeah, on the design system level, say with the help of storybook add-ons, you can see component in different resolutions. And as Irina mentioned, technically, when we have pull request to a design system, we always have a preview, so that we are sending designers the very link to like a storybook build, which is not yet
Before
merged.
release,
It's not yet merged into the main branch, but it's already available to see in browser. And then we rely on designers to check how it renders.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I have a question. So we're building a design system. We're on the baby steps, and at the same time, we're designing or redesigning our whole application, basically. So the problem or thought process that I'm facing multiple times is when I'm redesigning the whole application, and we have many different looking, screens or views in the application. at which point would you draw the line on when to create a component of a specific thing? Like when you're designing, for example, we have like, many components that have, text and stuff like that, and those can be of course used across the application, but as we have so many different kind of views and screens and features in the application, I'm thinking that should every single thing that I design be a component, or where would you draw the line on when to create a component out of something you design?
As a developer, for us, everything is a component, even if it's not reused. It's only question if it stays in design system or it stays in the product. For designers, I guess it's like it's your habits. For people who are experienced with making components, it's no-brainer to create more components, and they prefer to make the components. But it might be easier to go without it. We also once discussed if startups need to have design systems. And what you were asking was a bit similar to this question, because when you are in this environment of changing a lot and rapidly, probably it's not yet time for a systematic approach, because you have to be more creative.
Yes. Yeah. That's a problem, because as I'm like at the same time I'm thinking about the design system and the UX and UI as I'm designing, that kind of at times that limits my creativity. So that's a good point that maybe I should at this time maybe go, creativity first, and then look at the design, and then look at what should I component and create components out of and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's your advice.
Yeah. But at the same time, you already know that you always will have buttons, right?
Yes.
No matter how creative you are at your at your several next steps, the button will be there. So maybe these basic components you can already have as components.
Yes, that's what I've done so
Mm-hmm.
far.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. That answered my question.
Yeah, thank you.
So I know that design systems might have different purposes depending on the place they're used, but are there any examples you would like to show us? In Finland we have maybe around 7 public ones, but is there any specific ones you would like to showcase as a good example of design system?
It really depends on what you need, because when we are building a new component for current design system, we, as Irina mentioned, we always start with research. There are lists of design systems, open sourced, and we usually search for example, who has implemented an input component in this particular technology. And then we have some references. But for different components, references are always different. It has never happened that we borrowed everything from some design system. It always turns out that we borrow some, not even the whole component from this design system, but maybe how they approach accessibility from this system. But for other component, we use as a reference another system, and so on and so on. So there is no the best design system ever. Yeah, I cannot really name anything here. Yeah, but we use these catalogs of design systems a lot, especially like component.gallery. It's a bit outdated, but it has very good search. Or designsystems.surf. This is newer, but maybe search could be better. We use these catalogs a lot to see how other design systems do like the same component. Yeah?
Yeah, so from what I understood, what you just said,
you don't start with something like Material UI or Bootstrap or Ionic components and then kind of customize from there, but you make the components from scratch or use more like low-level libraries.
Both happens, but yes, we do use low-level libraries. I think most of our recent projects were using something, Ionic, Radix UI, or maybe some like low-level framework, like when we worked with web components, I think we used Lead. Yeah, I mean, it just it saves a lot of time because you don't have to implement the things which were already implemented, like accessibility for the button. Yeah, of course, you need to verify the technology, and it becomes a very important decision if you're starting a new design system from scratch. Yeah, we were usually, I remember we were building like 3 prototypes with different frameworks to verify that we can build the components that are needed by the organization.
Yeah, they still have some restrictions. None of them is like fully customizable. They always will be restrictions, and no,
Yeah.
at some point. And when we need to choose, we are building very basic setups, and then we discuss with the client. Okay, here we can implement this, but we will be restricted in that and that aspect. And there is another option which has like other limitations, and then together with the client, especially with technical representatives of the client, we can decide what exactly we have to take.
So I have one question. So do you see value in using web components? This is always like, is it the year of the web components or not?
Yeah, one of the recent projects was in web components with Lead for company. They had product in Vue, but also they had documentation in some platform. I don't even remember the name, but they wanted to use the same components in documentation and in the product, and the only way was web components, because this documentation was in some service, not there was no access to everything in source code, but it was possible to put a web component. Yeah, so
I've done Vue in Storybook. It's terrible. Yeah, just putting it out there.
I think.
Maybe we can come here. So we get your
Yeah, I've done Vue in Storybook and it's terrible.
Can you share what exactly is terrible?
I think you have to use the Vue 2 thing, so you can't use options API. So you can't use composition,
Okay.
which is what most people, if you want to, yeah, it's painful.
Yeah, hi. Yeah. Here?
Yeah, we have one here. Yep.
So in the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that developing a button component without a design system will take approximately 300 hours. Could you elaborate on that number? Why is it 300 hours?
It was just an example, and the number is imaginary.
But it was a number without the design system, correct? So we mean that many teams develop a button component again and again.
300 hours.
Many teams, many buttons. But yeah, that were imaginary numbers.
Yeah, I think it means that there's like many teams develop their own components, so it's like 200 man hours, not like to develop several conflicting components.
I also have
purpose.
the other question, which is maybe more relevant. How do you solve the problem of source of truth, where you have, imagine you have design tokens in Figma, and in your design code base, how do you sync them?
Usually, like if speaking about tokens, design files are source of truth, and we rely on designers to provide us JSON with tokens. It can be done manually, and then they export and just drop developers a file, or it can be done automatically, like if we tune this process so that on every save of the tokens, there will be a pull request to design system for developers to review.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any tools you use internally?
Style dictionary to transform this JSON with tokens to whatever we need on the development level, and usually even the same tokens to several representations, because say on development we need CSS variables, but for documentation we still need them in JSON. So we have kind of the same in different formats, and all transformed with style dictionary. Then
on the Figma side, there is a well-known Token Studio plugin, and then there is an alternative. I forgot what's it
now
called.
they use variables directly, I think.
Yes, still I would say not all the teams already adopted variables. Yeah, Figma API with variables, that would be the easier way to set up the automation. Then there are like some plugins, more with more features, less features, but all of them essentially provide the API to retrieve the tokens.
Thank you.
It's okay, there's another microphone close to the cameras there.
Okay, if you, yeah, look at the camera, yeah, perfect.
Yeah, well, so do you have some go-to stack which you would recommend right now for making a design system?
Like without any prerequisites?
Yeah, yeah, without prerequisites, or like in ideal conditions.
In ideal conditions, it's all set already. Yeah, but do you mean that the product already exists, or you are in very beginning?
It should exist that we build in design system, I guess. First comes product. There should be something minimal at least. I mean, do you want to start from choosing the framework? Because usually you still have a product. It's sounds unrealistic that there is no product and you can choose like really anything from the tech stack. Usually you would have at least like React or Vue or Angular, and then you have to adapt your tooling to what you have.
Or do you mean that you want to approach it from design side first?
Well, okay, yeah, no product, and just sort of do it that way, that you make a design system and you start with a design system and it doesn't come later.
Like even before you have a product? Maybe then in this case it would be on design side, and it's very much related to what we have discussed with redesign, right? Yeah, so if you first you probably don't need any design system, you just create the concept, but once you decide that you live with some of the components, you can detach them into component in Figma. And eventually you form a library of components. And once it comes to development, what you hand out to developers as a designer would be more systemized. They can start building library of components instead of building a product from scratch. Something like that, maybe. But this is very imaginary, so I never evidenced it happen.
So what you're saying is that the tech stack, for example, React Native plus Storybook, all of that depends entirely on the product and the features and the, it's like based on the team and deciding on what's best for the company and going forward. Is that your basically always situational, so there's no direct answer to what's best for all the scenarios?
Yeah, true. Like also when answering this question, I was thinking about one product only, but if this product exists in a range of products for some company, then we can approach it differently. Yeah. Yes.
Also, like to extend on that, what's your design system platform? What does it consist? If you like ignore if there is React or Vue or whatever, but what does the like your core platform consist of? It's Storybook. It's
Storybook.
yeah.
We considered, I think we considered other tools,
Yeah,
but eventually it was always Storybook.
We were testing, so these services that I was mentioning, sometimes they're needed just because the designers want to go and change the documentation. So then you look into some kind of integration. But yeah, I mean, I think Storybook does not have a real competition at the moment, just because it's adopted everywhere.
Yeah.
Any cool automation tooling that you have developed and that you would always take into your design projects, or are they per case as well?
Not sure. I mean, not sure I understand like automation. We of course we do have some our recipes like this Figma automation that we were describing, or some custom components for the Storybook. You know, every project you develop something, then you can kind of like use this experience.
I would say we have a list of our favorite add-ons in Storybook, but this is like nothing special. This is mostly what all the other design systems are using. Then Irina mentioned that we are usually setting up visual regression tests, and we are trying to push for this decision because it makes the development so much easier for us. So we are trying to do it on early stages, but sometimes we need to negotiate with client about spending resources for that. Then this customization for documentation, and also what I mentioned, we are setting up that for every pull request we have a preview, because it helps us with design reviews. And when we can give a designer a link to a browser, and they can check in the browser something which is not yet published for the design system users, it really enhances the quality, because designer can always spot something which can be improved.
You're using Chromatic tool for that, which is kind of a platform.
Yeah.
From Storybook creators, which does the visual regression testing and this kind of UI check perform on the pull request.
Yeah, Chromatic is great because it's very easy to set up. Unfortunately, sometimes it can be not in the budget for the client, so then you will have to go to some self-hosted solutions.
The free tier is also very generous in Chromatic.
Which one?
The free tier.
It depends on how often you want to run your tests, because actually if you want to run them on every pull request to check that the components are not breaking, it can eat the limit pretty fast on a large product again.
Yeah. You can also set up the way to dip the components so that you don't test the components that haven't been changed, but of course if you change tokens then it's
yeah, sure. There are optimizations, but yes, still. Any more questions?
I think we have time for one more. Yeah. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So our next event will take place 5th of November. The topic will be deterministic simulation testing. How many